Welcome to Observations, an open conversation about women's health. This is a space where physicians, patients, and other experts can sit down and have honest, evidence-based dialogue that cuts through the media bias and brings clarity back to maternal care and how we can care for both patients, mother and preborn child. With each episode, we will have real stories, real science, but also real questions about women's health today. From clinical insights to lived experiences, to aligned perspectives, and yes, also respectful disagreements. This is our goal, to bridge the gap between physician and patient, to empower informed decision-making, and bring back and elevate compassionate, fact-driven care. Now, a quick note before we dive in. Not every guest on the podcast is going to represent the views or positions of AAPLOG, but we believe that having open and honest conversations are going to make us better. So, grab your coffee, settle in, and let's get into today's observation.
Welcome to Observations. I'm your host for today, Dr. Christina Francis, the CEO here at AAPLOG. As many of you, I think, probably know, if you've followed our work, if you've listened to our podcast, you'll know that we have long discussed the dangers of the abortion pills, mifepristone and misoprostol, especially in the unregulated environment that we find ourselves in now, thanks to the FDA's really reckless actions, specifically in removing the in-person dispensing requirement that would allow women to have an in-person medical evaluation before they are given these drugs, and the in-person follow-up visits as well, to ensure that they are receiving ongoing medical care. The abortion industry likes to claim repeatedly that our concerns over these drugs, whether it be their safety or whether it be the potential for abuse, specifically in our current environment, they have claimed that these concerns are exaggerated or unfounded. But I think today's really important conversation with our guest underscores just how real and absolutely devastating those risks can be, and that those of us who were raising the alarm when the FDA removed that in-person dispensing requirement, that these drugs could then be used to force abortions on women who did not want them. We were accused of being fear-mongers, that we were making this up. And unfortunately, we are hearing more and more stories like the one that you will hear today about how these drugs are being used to abuse women and to force abortions. Our guest today, I'm so thankful to have her with us. Catherine Presley-Herring is going to courageously share her story with us today about being a survivor of abortion pill poisoning, an attack that she and her daughter both miraculously lived through. Her abuser, as she will share with us today, tried 7 times to end the life of their daughter and to poison her as well. So she's going to walk us through what happened, how she was able to fight back, and let me guarantee you that her story will inspire you as it inspired me. Just the courage that you had, Catherine, throughout this horrific time that you went through. Why the justice system, and I would argue really our medical system and our drug regulatory system, fell short and failed her and her daughter. And also the justice or supposed justice that her ex-husband received for his crime. So we're going to talk through all of that today. Catherine's joining us today not just to raise awareness of these very real dangers, but also, I think, to highlight the hope and resilience and strength that can emerge in women probably who don't even know that that's there, that they have the ability to withstand the kinds of things that Catherine did, even in the darkest of circumstances. And so, Catherine, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I had the immense honor and privilege of meeting Catherine in person in January as we both We're in Washington, D.C. for various activities, including the March for Life. But it was really wonderful to get to meet Catherine in person. I can guarantee all of you listening and watching today that she is even more inspiring and encouraging in person. Just Catherine, your strength, I think, just really shone through in everything that I witnessed you do that week in January in DC. And so we're just so thankful to have you on. And I know that people are really going to be informed and encouraged by your story today. So thank you for being willing to be vulnerable and share this difficult story, but also the hope that you found out of it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, before we jump into your story and what happened specifically surrounding the abortion pills, I'd love just to learn more about you and for our listeners and watchers to hear more about you. Can you just tell us about a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. I am a Houston mom of three, a small business owner. I have a little Etsy store called Old Southern Charm. And then I'm a grant writer. I'm the executive director of the Will Irwin Headache Research Foundation. So I feel like I'm kind of in the medical field with you all, but on the fundraising
Absolutely.
side. And then recently I launched a nonprofit organization to help other victims of domestic violence that's called the Stay at Your Home Mom Foundation.
So it sounds like you are a very busy woman, as you said, a mom of three. I'm sure that in your wildest dreams, you never would have imagined that you would have been thrust into the kind of situation that you were and that we're going to talk about today. So, can you start out by just kind of telling us, what was your marriage like before, and where were you at when you found out you were pregnant with your daughter?
Yeah, I was married to a very busy trial attorney for 11 years. I was mostly a stay-at-home mom at that point. I was taking care of our 6-year-old and our 2-year-old. Um, and I would say it was definitely a challenging marriage. There was alcohol abuse involved for many, many years. But the poisoning and the poisoning attempts was the first time that it had ever gotten physical.
And you all had started to have some struggles in your marriage, but then you found out you were pregnant. Is that right? Okay.
Yes. So just a few weeks before, actually, 1 week before I found out I was pregnant, I had caught my now ex-husband in a lie about his whereabouts. He told me that he was having a deposition at his office at midnight on a Tuesday. And I had been around long enough to know that that was not the norm. And so um, that night he asked for a separation. He wanted to work on himself, but I didn't have a lot of additional information about what was going on. And then 1 week later, I found out I was pregnant. Um, and I went to marriage counseling sessions with him, and it was there that I revealed the pregnancy news, and he did not take it well.
So sorry. I'm sure that had to have been very scary for you too, looking at an uncertain future for your marriage. And you had two children, living children at the time, and thinking about them, and now finding yourself pregnant. I think, probably a very common situation that a lot of women find themselves in with either an unexpected, unplanned pregnancy that maybe comes at not the best time, maybe, and
Right.
looking at, what do I do about that? Are you willing to share with us what some of your thoughts were at that time, about your baby that you're now carrying and the situation that you were facing? Just, what was your thought process like at that point?
It was difficult. Very confusing, especially since I wasn't being provided with the information of why our marriage was unraveling. Um, so really just trying to get some clarity, understanding, um, and yeah, a lot of fear. I was fearful as a stay-at-home mom with a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, what was life gonna look like? And then you add a pregnancy into the situation. Um, the world was kind of spinning, and I wasn't getting any kind of feedback from my husband, whether this was going to end in divorce or we were actively working through it. So I was trying to take it at face value that we were in marriage counseling. He was working on himself. The marriage counselor ended up advising us to go on spring break together. Um, and so we took a few days and went to my family's ranch in West Texas. And ultimately, the poisoning began the day after we came back from spring break.
Well, so moving then into then what happened, going into that, had you contemplated or had you ever said anything to your husband about contemplating abortion, or was that something that had ever even come up between the two of you?
No, never. We It was interesting because we had actively discussed having a third kid, and even a month or two before he was on board, I had a friend over who had a baby. He was holding the baby and joking like, "See, we could have a third," and that was just weeks and months before this happened. So it felt out of the blue, and we had struggled with infertility early on in our marriage. We had lost a child in 2017, the day after she was born. So we had really struggled with growing our family, and I could never have imagined that I would have ever been poisoned with abortion pills.
Absolutely, absolutely. Not that any time someone, forcing these pills on somebody who even was a little bit unsure, not that that would even be okay, but it sounds pretty obvious. He was pretty clear that this was not something that you would have wanted, that you wanted this baby. And yeah, okay. So you went on spring break to try to maybe heal things in your marriage, and then you get back from spring break, and then tell us what started happening then at that point.
So the day after we returned, it was St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. I'll never forget the date. And he arrived early in the morning to my house and brought me a cup of water and a biscuit. And my initial thought was um, hope. I really felt like, okay, maybe our time together with the kids, getting out of town, maybe it worked. And so he sat on the bed and he told me that during our time together in West Texas, he had noticed that I was not drinking enough water. And for the health of my pregnancy, he thought I needed to stay hydrated. And then he went on to say, "I'm not leaving this house until you finish this cup of water."
Did you said you were feeling hopeful. Did any warning bells start to go off for you at all early on at that point? Or did it, I mean, I could imagine if I were in your situation, I would just feel like you did, like, oh, he really cares about me. He really cares about what happens with this baby. But I know at some point something started to happen that you just kind of made you feel like something's not exactly right here.
Yes, I think one of the largest issues with domestic violence is that your head and your heart are playing against each other. So my head was thinking, this seems very strange, and one of the things that felt even more strange about the plastic cup with the water is that there wasn't any ice in it. It was just a glass of tap water. And so I thought, okay, he went to the trouble of going to a fast food restaurant, getting a biscuit to go, and then he's just going to bring me a cup of tap water. So that seemed a little strange to me, but my heart was so hopeful. I really wanted to save our marriage. I wholeheartedly believe in marriage for life. And so it was very challenging for me to watch my marriage fall apart. And so there was hope that morning. But as I sat and kind of sipped my cup and ate my biscuit, he seemed to start getting more angry, and he wanted me to drink faster. At one point, he stood up and he was hovering over me, angrily telling me to chug the water. And that was the moment that I, for the first time, looked down into the cup, and I had consumed about 3/4 of the cup of water. But the remainder was not clear. It was milky, almost creamy. I could see the streaks of creaminess in it. I immediately asked him, "What is this?" And he grabbed the cup out of my hands and looked down in it and said, "Oh, weird. I must have grabbed a dirty cup." And he left the house.
What was going through your mind then at that point when he's acting strange, you know it's not just water that's in the cup, but did it ever enter your mind that he would have put abortion pills in your cup
No,
and your water?
never.
Yeah.
I really thought, okay, this is continuing to be the trend of him acting strange.
Sure. Sure. Okay. And then what happened after that? Did you feel okay after drinking that cup of water? What happened next then?
So I kind of got under my covers and tried to go back to sleep. It was very early. The kids weren't even awake yet. It was still spring break. And about 30 minutes later, I started violently cramping. And I suddenly and urgently felt the need to get to the bathroom. And I did not make it from my bed to the bathroom that was adjoined to our bedroom. I ended up having diarrhea in my clothes. I got into the shower fully dressed, trying to calm my body down. And even in the shower, I was still truly in denial. I thought this is the worst case of food poisoning anyone has ever had. I started thinking, what did I have for dinner last night? Replaying
Mhm.
the night's events. And I ultimately changed into new pajamas, got back in my bed, tried to get my body to calm down, and then it happened a second time. And once it happened the second time, I knew this was not food poisoning and it was likely something that was in the cup. Um, and whenever I speak out and have a chance to share my testimony, um, I often say that the embarrassment of this story going worldwide, the Associated Press broadcasting this around the world, is nothing compared to the pain and the suffering of what was going on in that moment. I lost complete bodily control, and could not get my body to calm down. Ultimately, I had remembered a article that I had seen about the backlash that Google was facing from blocking abortion pill reversal ads. And in that chaos of trying to figure out what was going on and thinking, is he trying to hurt me or is he trying to hurt the baby? That
Mm.
article headline, I hadn't even read the full article. It came in my mind and I thought, what's an abortion pill reversal? That's the craziest thing I've ever heard. I have no idea what this is, but I Googled it. And when I Googled it, a hotline number came up. And I called them. I said, "This is the wildest thing you're ever going to hear. But I think my husband put something in my drink this morning. And if he was trying to hurt the baby, is there anything I can do to stop it?"
Wow. Wow. Amazing. I mean, such a blessing that you had seen that headline, that you even knew to do that. And do I was thinking as I heard your story earlier too, at that point, were you aware at all that abortion pills were available online without a doctor? Like, is that something that was even on your radar at that? I know
No.
you know this now, obviously,
Right.
but was
No,
that something that was even on your radar at that point?
absolutely not. No clue. I didn't have a background on abortion pills or availability, anything at
Okay,
all.
okay. But man, seeing that headline about abortion pill reversal, not only it sounds like maybe helped you realize maybe this is what's going on with me, but also
Right.
your first thought, which I think is a first thought for many mothers, is if my baby's in danger, is there anything that I can do to help my baby? And so you called the hotline and got in touch with one of the nurses. And then what was their response to you when you said, I have this crazy story to tell you, but I think this might be going on?
They were so calm. They were incredible. And a shout out to Heartbeat International, the network of abortion pill reversal regimens, because the woman I spoke with was so well trained, so calm. She prayed over me, prayed over my baby, and she just jumped into action and was trying to get me a prescription for progesterone. So, abortion pill reversal, as your viewers I know understand well, it's just cons- uh, um, taking progesterone and reinvigorating those hormones back in. And miraculously, as she was trying to get me a prescription, I remembered that I had already been prescribed progesterone in a previous pregnancy. And so I started searching my medicine cabinet, ultimately found the progesterone, and she was able to guide me through the correct dosage for that first dose within an hour of being poisoned.
And you were how many weeks pregnant at the time when this started?
Early, early. I had not even been to my OB to confirm the pregnancy. Ultimately, that day, I continued having diarrhea and started bleeding, and the hotline number encouraged me to go to the emergency room. So, at the emergency room, they were able to confirm the pregnancy.
Okay.
I've never been so relieved to see that
Yeah,
tiny heartbeat.
I bet.
And they were able to let me know that I was around 7 weeks pregnant.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, and we have a lot of doctors that listen and watch this podcast. And when Catherine and I first heard your story too, one of the things that really struck me was for you to have that kind of explosive reaction to the drugs that quickly. That had to have been a massive dose of, and at the time you didn't know what drug it was that you had been given. We'll talk about in a minute, you were able to figure that out later, but regardless, for you to have that quick of a reaction, and certainly any OB physician who's listening or midwife, will understand that even when we use drugs like misoprostol in smaller doses, that's a possibility of that happening. But for it to happen that quickly and to that extent, it had to have been a massive dose of the drug. And so making it even more miraculous that your daughter survived, and honestly, that you didn't have a life-threatening outcome from this as well. Of course, so
Absolutely.
you're in the emergency room. Then tell us what, and thankfully you found out your baby's okay,
Yeah.
which is amazing news. But then tell us what happens next from there.
Yeah. So when I arrived at the emergency room, one of the first procedures is to ask for a urine sample. And so even before the sonogram, I had provided a urine sample that was black in color. The medical team was very concerned. They rushed. They got a doctor out of surgery to come see, what needed to be done. One of the scariest parts, even of being in the emergency room and not knowing what it is that you've consumed, is that ERs aren't fully capable of testing for pharmaceutical drugs. They were able to test my blood and urine sample for recreational drugs, but they were not helpful in any capacity of helping me figure out what it was that I had consumed. So they encouraged me to continue the progesterone, but they were not hands-on helping with the reversal process. So I'm so grateful for the hotline number in that area. And then in the emergency room, they believed I was going into kidney failure. I actually have a picture, if it's okay to
Yeah,
share
I think you
um,
should.
your viewers
Yeah.
with your viewers. But this was my urine sample upon check-in. So really, really scary, um,
Yeah.
as you can imagine.
Yeah, very scary because you don't know what you've ingested. And when I first heard you share your story and you held up that picture, even before you said the doctors were concerned you were going into kidney failure, that was my immediate thought. That would have been one of my biggest concerns as well if I saw urine that looked like that. Um, so yeah, it had to be very scary. And as you said, there aren't currently any commercial tests available to test for either mifepristone or misoprostol, to be able to know. And for a woman in your situation who this has been forced upon, who really wants to know not only, for ensuring that you're doing everything that you can for your health and for your baby's health, but then obviously, we'll get to later, then, a criminal case that would be very, very important to be able to
Right.
test for that and know.
Well, and it felt like the emergency room was completely unprepared for my situation. We weren't sure what I had consumed. And then even at the end, no one ever advised me to keep my urine sample or keep a blood sample, which hindsight's always 2020. That would have been very helpful as I partnered with a private investigator to try to figure out what the drug was. It's very, very difficult to test a liquid for pharmaceutical drugs, but blood and urine seem to be a little bit easier to try to figure out what was consumed.
So at that emergency room visit, was your blood work, did they once they tested your blood and things like that, were your kidneys okay, or what did they tell you then at the end of that visit as you left?
There wasn't very much guidance that I can remember. I continued antibiotics into the coming days. I chose to continue the progesterone while I was still bleeding. The hotline nurse was still in touch, but they were very hands off about it possibly being an abortion pill poisoning. And I think one of the scary things is even the 11% that's mentioned with abortion pills that go to emergency rooms. I don't think that my case is even calculated into that 1% because in the medical files, it's not clear cut. Like
Right.
because I didn't choose to take an abortion pill. So we weren't sure. And then it took months for us to confirm with Houston Police Department that it was in fact abortion pill drugs. So there's definitely cases that aren't even being included in the data.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really important point to make, especially as we know this kind of scenario is becoming more and more common. And, I think probably a lot of emergency room doctors, OB doctors don't even realize the ease with which people can get these drugs, to force them on other people. As well as, I think it's important that you highlighted the fact that The doctors didn't really know about the abortion pill reversal process either. And, this is really similar. I know we compare it a lot to like using Narcan to reverse the effects of like a fentanyl overdose or something like that. This is a truly time-sensitive, life-saving issue, life-saving for that baby, potentially, that emergency room doctors need to be aware of. And so, of course, that's something AAPLOG is continuing to work on. We partner with Heartbeat. I'm an abortion pill reversal provider. I'm part of the network and have done that. But it is so important that all doctors know about this possibility so that if a woman chooses to take the pills but then changes her mind, or if a woman is in your situation where it was forced upon her, she didn't choose it and really wants to save her baby, that she has the opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. I think forced and coerced abortion is a crime trend that's just increasing. And so you're right. If a woman comes to an emergency room and tells them that they've been forced into taking pills, um, there needs to be a protocol in place of what to do and how to guide these women into reversing the
Absolutely.
poisonings or the forced
Absolutely.
abortions.
Absolutely. And I think we should make the point too that this has nothing to do with where someone stands on the issue of abortion, whether they are against it, whether they are in support of women having the ability to choose to have an abortion. This has nothing to do with that. This has to do with women who want to save their babies and giving them the opportunity to do that. And because it is time sensitive, as you said, we really need to be sure that more doctors are aware of it.
Absolutely. And for even the states where abortion is allowed and women are choosing it, to get the physician involvement back in place, after consuming these drugs, I can testify to the horrific effects. Even if someone is choosing this, and I often think about women that are 20 years younger than me, girls who are in their dorm rooms and college campuses, hundreds of miles from their parents and their support system, who think these side effects are normal or I should just stay in place and it'll go away. It's terrifying to me, and doctors and nurses are essential. Even if you've chosen this, these effects are very scary and need, for example, my urine sample and needing an antibiotic and protecting me from going into kidney failure. This is truly happening, and women need partnership with this drug. It should not be taken without some kind of medical advisement.
Absolutely. Catherine, what would be your response to those that are out there saying these drugs are safer than Tylenol? The experience is just like a heavy period. And I know your experience was a little bit different, of course, because thankfully, the abortion was not successful in ending the life of your daughter. But what would be? I mean, you've lived through this horrific experience. So, what would be your response to people who are making these claims, especially to very vulnerable young girls, like you said? Girls who are in
Right.
college who are scared and they're told that this is easy. You can do it from home. You can do it from your dorm room. It's just going to be like a heavy period. It's no big deal. How would you respond to that?
I think that there is no harm whatsoever in having a doctor or a nurse just check in on a patient. Make sure they're doing okay, that the bleeding hasn't gotten excessive, that in my case, for example, that the diarrhea hasn't gone so far that you're dehydrated, you may need an IV. And so I really have advocated for bipartisan support of getting the physician involvement back in place and bringing a support system to young women.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They deserve that kind of care. They don't deserve a subpar, substandard care simply because they've chosen to have an abortion, or, in cases like yours, or they haven't chosen. But either way, they deserve to have that ongoing care. This story would be bad enough, Catherine, if that was single time that your husband tried to end the life of your daughter, but it wasn't. Tell us what happened next, and for kind of the rest of your story then of what happened.
Sadly, just getting through that and the world was still spinning. I have to say, everything was upside down. I was trying to get a grasp of reality. Again, your head and your heart are playing against each other in domestic violence. And so I was hopeful I was getting it wrong. Maybe I'm not seeing this correctly. Maybe it's just vitamins. And so I took some time that weekend and I went to a hotel. I had planned on being out of town that weekend. I had set up childcare already. And so I took the time and went to the hotel. And when I got there, I realized I had left my prescription at home from the emergency room. And so I texted my then husband and said, "Hey, I'm going to swing by and grab my prescription." And he said, "No, no, no, you can't come in. The kids will go crazy. I'll leave it in the mailbox." And quickly after, he texted me again and said, "Hey, do you want a cranberry drink?" And I thought, I'm going to say yes and just see what happens. And so, sure enough, he left me a drink in the mailbox with my antibiotics. And I took it back to the hotel and I thought, I wonder what this would look like if I left it overnight. And so I put it on my bedside table. The next morning, lifted the lid, and there were chunks of powder in the top of the cranberry drink. So I knew that I was dealing with something. I ended up partnering with my private investigator and brought him the cranberry drink as well as an orange juice, spiked with abortion pills the next day, and then a simply orange juice the very next day. So it was 4 attempts within, I believe, 5 days, which is really terrifying because if my urine sample was already black and I wasn't on to him, what would it have looked like? I think it would have been very, very dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That is terrifying.
Yes.
Um, and so to your knowledge, after that first time, did you ever end up ingesting any more of it, or you caught it every time it happened?
So
Yeah.
I just pretended to consume it. I would say thank you, and then I would take it immediately to my private investigator. This was a very long process. So he attempted 7 times over the course of 39 days, and ultimately we caught him on a hidden camera that was installed in my kitchen, fixing drink number 7.
And then I can't even fathom, and just the wherewithal that you had through all of this um to get firm evidence so that you could build a good case against him to ensure that he was punished for this crime that he had committed. Um, I have a lot of questions I could ask, a lot of information
Yes.
that would just so at what point were you able to figure out or were you able to figure out what it was he had actually given you?
So the attempted poisonings ended up happening in 2 segments. We believe likely he probably paused to see if it worked. And he went to Las Vegas for a little while, and I was able to start gathering my team of just sound-minded people. My head was so confused, everything was spinning, and I knew I needed clarity. I needed really sound-minded, clear thinkers to help guide me. Um, and the first section happens, there's a lull, a couple of weeks, and then he gave me a little bit of a heads up. He said, "I'm going to bring you breakfast again." And so I had a feeling that it was gearing up again. But during that lull, we installed cameras on the exterior of my home as well. And I noticed that he was at my house and had cleaned out his car and took the trash to the trash can at the curb. It was a little strange for 2 reasons. First of all, he that was not normal behavior. He was not a husband that would take the trash can to the curb very often,
Sure.
so that was unusual, but also he was not living at my house at the time. So I thought, "Okay, now we're doing chores for a house that we don't even live
Yeah.
in."
Yeah.
And so I had a friend come with me, and we ended up going through the trash, and we found packaging, empty pill packets of Cyrox, which is a Mexican pharmaceutical drug for misoprostol.
Okay. Okay. So he had obtained these in Mexico or from Mexico somehow. And then at least then at that point you kind of knew what you were dealing with, and how far along in your pregnancy were you about when you finally have the video evidence of him?
So it would have been 39 days after
Okay.
7 weeks. Who's going to be the mathematician
That's
on that
right.
one?
That's right. So about a month later or so. So probably 11 to
Yes.
12 weeks it sounds
Right.
like.
So getting out of the first
Yeah,
trimester into
trimester.
the second.
Okay.
And ultimately after he was arrested and through the criminal process, we were able to gather evidence that he had a co-conspirator in El Paso that got the drugs for him, and then we believe he likely mailed the drugs from El Paso to Houston.
Okay. Okay. So at 12 weeks or so, when around the time he gets arrested, baby's still doing okay at that point?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
everything, all the testing was good. You can only imagine the stress that I was
absolutely.
under. I was not sleeping. I've ultimately been diagnosed with complex PTSD, and one of the largest side effects was the insomnia. It was really terrifying to have someone attempting to poison you and just in and out of your house, keys to the house, the alarm code, and everyone was guiding me through not to tip him off. So we didn't want the locks to be changed or anything so that we could gather the evidence that would be needed.
My goodness. So in addition to the immediate health effects that this had on you, the immediate health effects that it had on your daughter, you now have a mental health condition that you are, I'm sure, still at times dealing with. And so I'm just laying all that out to say this is the impact of that he had on you, on your daughter, on your life, you know potentially for the rest of your life, though I know that you're doing well now, and doing a lot of good. But this wasn't just in the immediate. This was a long-term impact that this abuse had on you. Um, and despite that, despite the fact that he very well, I mean, I think, Catherine, it's reasonable as a physician thinking about this and not knowing what dose of misoprostol he was giving you, what that could have led to had you not realized it and taken all of those doses that he had tried to give you. I have no doubt that not only would your daughter have lost her life, but it's very feasible that you could have, or at least suffered, life altering physical outcomes from that as well.
Absolutely. I don't
Despite,
take that for granted at all. I mean, I feel very lucky to be alive today. And that's one of the reasons that I try to vocalize that this is happening to real people.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because it's not just theoretical at all that this could happen. It is happening, and
Well, and I
and
wanted to add too, one of the scariest parts of this as a mom, not just for Josephine, who I was pregnant with, but also my older two kids. I had a 6-year-old and 2-year-old that were at home for all 7 of the first poisoning and then the 6 additional attempts. And oftentimes these drinks were left unattended, one of which, drink number 6, was in a Sonic cup, a blue slushy. And he left a blue slushy and a red slushy next to each other in my 2-year-old daughter's room and said, "The blue one's for mom, the red one is for our daughter," and left the house. And if I had not known that this was going on, it's really terrifying to think, what would abortion pills have done to a 2-year-old little girl?
Right, absolutely. And to be in a slushy, a drink that is going to be very attractive to a 2-year-old, that
Right.
she would want to drink that, I'm sure. Yeah.
And one
Yeah.
of the horrifying things I have felt throughout the criminal process is there was never even a child endangerment charge raised. I think the justice in this case was just not present. I
Yeah.
mean, he received ultimately 180 days, and the charge was assault of a pregnant person and assault of injury to a child through a sweetheart plea deal.
180 days for almost taking your daughter's life, and really could have very easily taken your life as well. Again,
Absolutely.
had you ingested all of that
Right.
drug that he tried to force on you, and as you said, actively put your other children in danger as well. I mean, only by the grace
Absolutely.
of God did they avoid some
Right.
kind of
I mean,
physical injury.
truly, I believe the only reason I'm here is because I stopped drinking the drinks that the person I loved and trusted most in this world gave to me.
Right? Oh my goodness, Catherine. So 180 days was all he received of jail time for this horrendous crime. And I can't
Well,
imagine how
I
that
will
must
I
feel.
will clarify, it was 180 days plus probation. So we'll say the disclaimer there.
That's right. I'm sure that probation addition was a huge comfort to you, I'm sure. I'm being facetious, of course. But
So I will say that for anyone listening out there too who might be a victim of domestic violence, the protective order has ended up being the most important document, and that he was found guilty of family violence and very quickly after the first arrest. And so I was provided with a 19-year protective order for myself and for baby Josephine, and then a 10-year protective order for my other 2 children. And that has been crucial. The protective order ultimately has given me the most protection of all, even though, it's people think it's just a piece of paper, but it is a very important piece of paper.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank goodness for that you are now protected from any further abuse that he might intend for you or for your children. You referenced baby Josephine. Can you give us an update on her? How is she doing? How old is she now? Yeah.
Yes, it has been a long road. I really thought, getting through the pregnancy and delivering her was such a miracle. But it's been a long road, and she has spent over 160 days in and out of ICU, the NICU, PICU, hospitals. At 14 months, she was nonverbal, non-mobile, and did not eat or drink by mouth. She had a G button feeding tube. She also had a surgery. Now I'm forgetting the name. You may be able to help me with this one, but she had a surgery to stop chronic acid reflux. They tied off between her stomach and her esophagus, I believe.
Mhm, mhm. Yep, probably tightened
Anyways,
that muscle, that little valve there.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, and
yeah.
I've always thought that was interesting from a medical standpoint, because a lot of people bring up that abortion pills are used for acid reflux, and I found
Ugh,
that really interesting that that was tied into Josephine's health, effects
Yeah.
that she's gone through. But she is a poster child for physical therapy. If she walked in today, you would just be so proud of the strides that she's made, and she's happy, and we found so much peace in our
Good.
life.
Good.
So we're grateful.
Good. Well, that is amazing news to hear. I'm glad she's doing so much better. I know she was born pretty preterm, right? Was it 28 weeks that you
Yes,
delivered
my
her?
water broke at 28 weeks, and then I was on hospital bed rest. We were trying to keep her cooking as long as possible, and then our goal was 30 weeks, and it was 30 weeks in 1 hour, and I was sent
Okay.
to emergency C-section
Okay.
C-section surgery.
Okay. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, so thankful that she's alive today, so thankful that she's doing better. And but she also faced, an uphill battle, as you said, even though you made it kind of past the danger zone of okay, you get her to the point of viability, but still also had an uphill battle, I'm sure, because of effects of the drug that had been forced upon you. Catherine, as we start to wrap this up a little bit, I wanted to sort of address two final things with you, and you can answer them in either order. I could see some people listening to this to say, well, okay, I mean, it's awful, of course, what happened to her, but her ex-husband got these drugs from Mexico. What does that have to do with what's happening in the US right now? I mean, somebody could get drugs, illegally, whatever, from Mexico. Maybe we'll start with this. What does that have to do with what's happening in the US right now? How would you respond to that criticism? Because of course your situation is slightly different than, maybe what we're talking about what's happening in the US, but also actually very similar.
Right. I would say that we don't know the full story of what happened to me. And we may never know the full story. We know that we found one package from
Sure.
Mexico, but with 7 attempts, we're not exactly sure what happened. I also find it scary that there are co-conspirators out there that have never been questioned that are in the United States. Who is this person in El Paso? And so there's lots of unanswered questions for me. And absolutely, as we continue the conversation in the United States, these questions need to be asked. Who are the bad actors who are helping people create scenarios of forced and coerced abortion? That's important to all of us as Americans.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. And, of course, now with that removal of the in person dispensing requirement, now these drugs are available through really filling out a simple form online. And then they are mailed across the country to every state in the country. And as we said at the beginning, we are hearing, unfortunately, more and more of these stories of women who are having abortions either completely forced on them as they were on you with no participation whatsoever in that, or women that are just being extremely pressured by their partners. I've heard stories of the partner standing there watching them, threatening them until they actually took the pills, that sort of thing. And that's happening more and more. What would be your advice to women? I know you said you started a nonprofit for women who have experienced or are experiencing domestic violence in general. What would be your advice to women who are finding themselves in very difficult abusive situations? What do you tell women that you interact with as part of the work that you do to try and encourage them to find safety, to find help? Yeah, what would be your words of encouragement or advice to them?
Safety is the key word. Every time I'm ever approached by women in domestic violence situations, I always say, make a safety plan. You can really work everything else out after, as long as you are safe. And so circling yourself, like I mentioned before, creating a team, even if your brain is fuzzy, you're having that cognitive dissonance that's so um just it infiltrates you when you're going through domestic violence because you don't want to believe that this is true. And so to have people who do have clarity, who can guide you, whether that be a private investigator, an attorney, someone from a police department, and then your friends, making sure you have a team of women surrounding you that are supporting you and affirming what you're saying. Even in my case, there were people that said, maybe you're not seeing this clearly. And then as the truth came out and more evidence came in, I realized that the people who stood by me and believed me from the very beginning, that was so important to this process. So just gathering your team around you, and staying safe, and everything else will work out.
Absolutely. Such good advice. I know it's so hard, as you said, for women in that situation to be able to think clearly and strategize like you were able to do because of that team of people that you had around you. And also a reason why it's so important, specifically on the issue of abortion pills being available. Also why it's so important that a doctor be involved to support women, not only to provide good medical care, but oftentimes we as physicians and other medical professionals, oftentimes we're that one point of contact where a woman can find some help, to be able to be honest with someone and let them know what's going on. And we certainly really want to be that for our patients, but we can't be if we're being removed from the equation altogether. And so it really is so important that women have that support around them, and as you said, first and foremost, make sure that they have a plan for safety in place. So
Absolutely. And as a physician, too, if they don't have a strong support system, if an abuser has removed them from their friends and family, another resource is pregnancy centers. There's so many incredible pregnancy centers out there that can get them together with social workers, that can get supplies for diapers or formula, that can really be a resource for them as well.
absolutely, absolutely. Catherine, thank you so much for being willing to use your voice, for being willing to share a really hard story that I think a lot of women would hesitate to share. For many reasons, but it's so important that women be able to use their voices when they feel comfortable doing so, so that people understand what's going on. And I'm sure that there are women that will listen to this podcast that maybe are in a similar situation to what you were, and will find some encouragement from this. Will find wisdom and knowledge of what to do to try to get themselves and their children out of that situation. So I can't thank you enough for your voice. It's so important in this fight that we're in. Not only, of course, for us at AAPLOG, we always say that we're caring for two patients, both mom and baby. So, of course, we care about saving those babies' lives. We also care so deeply for women. And it just is so important that people are aware of what is happening, likely each and every day, to women in this country. I just think for all the stories that we do hear publicly, how many are happening that we never hear about and that we never know about. And so thank you for being a voice for women across the country.
Absolutely. It was an honor to be here. Thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely. So great having you. And again, we will put links to the organizations that Catherine referenced in the show notes. And we look forward, Catherine, to staying in touch with you and Josephine, and hearing how she continues to just grow and develop. So thank you so much for joining us this week, Catherine.
Absolutely.
All right. And thank you to all of our listeners and watchers for joining us this week for Observation. We will see you on our next episode.
We hope that you enjoyed today's episode of Observations and that it broadened your perspective on women's health and how we can care for both patients, mother, and preborn child. If you like this episode, make sure to give us a 5-star review where you can find your podcasts. Make sure that you like this on YouTube and subscribe to our channel for more episodes coming up. And if you have any suggestions on any topics that we should cover or guests that we should have on, make sure that you email us at media@applog.org. Again, thank you for joining us for today's observation, and we'll see you in our next episode.